So if there are V1 or V2 users on the call, you are also action users. And while you love the actions functionality, you've always been craving for more when it comes to integrating business logic. And with V3 beta just around the corner, you must have seen the preview which Lyndon provided of the TypeScript connector in the last community call. So we're going to just provide more developments on that front, especially on the entire local development journey of working with TypeScript functions, working with Deno, and making sure that your custom business logic, and you have a very fast REPL loop while working on your TypeScript function, so that once you push to DDN or V3, self-assured your custom business logic should work. So that's a preview of what you're going to see in the next videos. Big shout out to Lyndon for providing us a deep dive into integrating business logic.
We're going to do a bit of a NDC TypeScript Deno speedrun. We'll set up some functions, have them running in a connector locally, and then use the tunnel functionality of the Hasura CLI to be able to test it with a cloud-based console. So let's go. Firstly, let's create a little skeleton. So currently there's just this script in here, but we'll make a functions directory, touch some functions, and then echo a empty functions config. So once we've got all that up and running, we can spin up our connector. So we should be able to run this pointing to our configuration, and we'll see that by default, this skeleton is the format that it's going to look for. So we'll start by writing a function. And you'll see that when we save that, our watcher, because we're using Deno Watch, will refresh. And then if we code the schema, you'll see that it's not actually included there. So what we'll do now is export the function. And you'll see that exported functions are included in the schema. So now let's paste some previously defined functions in here. So if I go here and grab some other functions, and then format them nicely. And let's see what happens when we call the schema this time. So we've got our pure function foo and procedures for our impure functions. And these are making use of the fetch function that's included with Deno and hitting HTTP bin. So some other things that you can do are use structured input types. So let's define one. And then let's export a function. See that this now should be conformant, although let's change that to something that's not a reserved word. Here we go. And let's make it a little bit more interesting by combining these. And here we'll say there we go. So let's have a look at the schema now. There we go. And so you'll see that for these ones we'll have a scalar, but for this one we'll have an object response and argument types. There you go. So one limitation of HGE's engine currently, which is soon to be relaxed, is that input types can't be complicated like this. They have to be separate. So let's say that will split them up for now. And now this should be able to be used from the engine. Since we've got about a minute left, let's also show an example of maybe throwing some kind of issue or error. So if we take this one and use a union result, then you should see this will return some interesting validation issues. So when there are errors like this, it'll just assume that the result is a scalar and won't actually structure the output. So first thing, let's take out that inference issue. And what we're going to want to do next is actually create a Hasura project and spin it up and start a tunnel so that we can use this running connector to test it out from the console. So first, we'll want to initialize our directory. Once we've done that, you'll see that we now have a few more files. So what we're going to want to do is edit our metadata file and reference our connector. So if we go here, then we should now have our connector referenced. And from here, we can actually refresh the data source to import the schema, which is the same as the one we were curling. And then once we've done that, we can track our collections. And so you'll see that all of the functions we have just defined should now be exposed as commands. From there, let's proceed on to our next steps. Firstly, we're going to want to ensure that we have our local service exposed via a tunnel. So you need to run this daemon. And then let's have a new shell available so that we can do more things in parallel. This tunnel create command will actually set up the cloud side of the tunnel, but since we've already done that, we can just show that it is now connected and active. So with this URL, back in our metadata, we should be able to replace this local connector URL with our tunnel connector URL. Then back in our script, we'll create a new project. That'll give us a project ID. Then from there, we should be able to go into our Hasura config and put our project ID. And then finally, we'll create a build for that project. This will give us a console URL. And if I open that in the correct browser, then you should see that we have an active build, and you can already see that we have functions that we can reference here and get the expected output. And some of them are mutations, so let's do that. And take out the query. And let's do all three, why not? So we'll start with bar, parse, and QUX. Hello. Why not 1.5? Let's see what happens here. There we go. So now we've got our local connector up and running and able to be experimented with from the console. You can even dynamically change what's going on here. If you edit your functions, let's just change our foo functions to say haha instead of lol. See, it has reloaded here, performed the correct inference. If we rerun our query, then you should see that we're doing our mutations. Let's run our query instead. If you do our query and remove the mutations, then you should see we have haha coming back with no other changes required. Unfortunately, if you do want to change the signatures for any of the functions, you will need to create a new build and update the metadata correspondingly. But that's a little speed run of what it would look like to get that set up. So the really interesting thing I'll just wrap up with is that if you can kind of create sophisticated enough functions using your TypeScript connector, then you should actually be able to adopt the TypeScript connector and create a fully fledged connection-based connector with the NDC TypeScript repo, which I'll link as well. Thanks, everyone.
I just want to say a lot of many things coming on DDN, and we are soon going to release it for public use, and feel free to use that form to get access to early alpha of the product, but looking forward to any feedback or as you try the product out. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. And folks, again, the form that he's talking about is in the chat, so you can scroll up and find it there over on the right-hand side. Thanks, Rahul.